Does the majority not know what the protest is about? 90%
We are not-
the whole, as a concept on the whole, as a group is the bad apple of the society, not only just
Okay.
one bad apple. All eyes on Rafa is not going to bring any impact in society. Just
You
putting out
have to talk about Manipur violence then.
So yeah, your opening statement on the topic activism and protest being an essential part of society starts now.
Society, although can be divided into multiple portions, falls down to the idea of being surrounded around human beings. And the idea of humankind comes surrounded by the fact that humans have the ability to speak up and express. And especially for us living in the world's greatest democracy, not just to us, but in any democracy or any country absolutely existing in this world, speaking up is essential for the people. And it percolates and it ensures that the people stay in a harmonious and fresh country. And protests and activism are one of the multiple ways provided by the law of any country, any law above any country's law for the people to speak up. The idea that protests and activism could even be considered a disease or something disharmonious or something that would disarm or dismantle the peace, harmony, or the subtlety of a country is absolutely bogus. Because the entire point of protests and activism and the right for the people to speak up is to ensure and to float and to fuel the entire idea of a democracy, of a society. The idea that protesting and activism and speaking up might dislocate and harm peace is absolutely flawed, because speaking up and expressing is what leads to peace. We've seen whenever in history, whenever in a huge civilization, whenever in mankind, a people kind has been shunned, a kinship has been shut down, a lot of Khatri of people has been asked to keep quiet and not speak up. That has resulted in only disaster. And we've seen multiple examples and exemplars throughout history that whenever activism is ruled as the correct option, that has led to a change in humankind for the greater good. That has led to a change in what we live in, the society we live in today, the world we see formed around, and the activism and the free speech and the humankind we see today is all formed because somebody, some rebellious asshole decided to speak up 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 1,000 years ago. Back in the day, they must have been called contagious. They must have been called stupid. They must have been called an activist, a rebel, an idiot for speaking up. But that idiocracy is exactly what led to us sitting here today with the resources we sit. So the entire idea of revolving protesting and activism around humankind has been embedded into the essentialities of us being alive and us living as a society. And anyone who ever tries to prove otherwise is part of the idiocracy that once led this world's downfall.
Okay, perfect. Only first guy who completed before 3 minutes, of course. Okay, I'll start my opening remarks. First of all, I believe that I am not against activism or protest or people's right to speak. Okay, I'm not against that at all. I feel like there are good parts to activism and protest which must be acknowledged. But I feel that it is a disease. Activism and protest is a disease which can be cured. Now I'll first get into why or what the disease is about. Right? Firstly, activists are delusional. They feel like they can bring impact and do something, but there is none. And I'll give examples. And when they know that they cannot bring impact, they will promote it like an MLM scheme. They will like people to join it. They will like people to bring impact together, which also in turn doesn't bring any impact. Firstly, they started with body shaming or the whole concept. They started protesting that. Then after they got into BLM, then after they got into gender, then after they got into Ukraine, then after now they are stuck at Palestine. And out of all these things, since years, there is no change brought up by this activist or protest. They say that they are promoting the problems, but that is not actually solving the problems. Protesters don't know what they are talking about. Whenever there are any protest happening, you go to the protester and you ask them, what are you even protesting about? They fail to explain. Other than that, whenever they are protesting, they don't have any solution to provide. They don't have any alternative to provide. They are just protesting to the problem as a whole. They are doing promotion of the problem, they are doing protesting towards the problem, and they are not even focusing on the right problem. That is the biggest problem with activism, that it is selective. They ignore the real problem that exists. Like, say for example, activism in India is purely people whose minds are in New York but they are living in India. They protest about gun violence, which does not even exist in India. The real problems of India, like malnutrition, stunning, free market, hunger, all those are the real problems of India. That is where they need to talk about. And all of the people who were talking about gender are, whenever Ukraine thing happened, all of their DPs changed to Ukraine Jandas. And whenever Ukraine or whenever Palestine happens, there all of their DP changes to Palestine. But they forget the earlier problem that already existed. Even if it was a smaller problem, it was not a real problem, it still was addressed, and then it was not solved at the end. Other than that, I feel like they don't work themselves, and like they don't even identify the problems that exist in their own life. They are not cleaning their room first before going out. They don't know what problems their own family are facing, their own communities are facing, because they are not even looking at it. They just want to be activists, protesters, to be cool in the universities where they don't belong, where they feel like they don't belong, where their sense of belongingness is not there. So they just talk there, they just talk on Twitter there to have a sense of validation in their universities from their professors, from their friends. That is the real activism, and that is why it is a disease. Now we go to the 1 minute round. Go ahead.
So you talked about, just the people switching sides very quickly, going from Ukraine to Palestine, jumping sides. That is what activism is supposed to be. Active, fresh opinions and ideating on whatever is currently going on in the world. You say activists are delusional. You say activists just aim to be out there for validation. You say activists are delusional as they don't actually bring some change. Do you realize that once in this country, even our freedom fighters and the people standing for India's independence would have been considered delusional, but they brought the biggest change that this country's political landscape has ever seen. They brought us this country's goddamn independence. You talk about activism just promoting a problem and not solving it, but that is a better part of society than not speaking up at all. Making sure the problem reaches everyone who still doesn't know about it is still a larger contribution than just shutting down and staying quiet in your own house.
As you acknowledge rightfully, that are actually the good parts of society, right? But the promotion is not enough. The way that they are protesting, the way that they are blocking the roads, the way that they are ruining the harmony of the country is where the problem lies. I feel like for the promotion part of it, if you are speaking up, it is fine till then. But if you are stopping the system from functioning just because you want to do promotion of the thing, even without providing any alternative solution to the problem, that is where the thing lies. If you talk about the harmony point or peace point that you bring up earlier, whenever you bring out the point of where they have ruined system, they have ruined kingmanship, that is where more of the peace and harmony is being disturbed. I am not saying that the dictatorship is more peaceful. I am saying that these people are coming from that thing. These people are actual Marxists who are being activists. That is where they come from. If you observe any of the protester activists or people, they actually are against the system. And they don't want system to function at all because they are inside the system themselves. Yeah, now it comes to 2 minutes now.
What is this 2 minutes round?
No problem. So this is detailed round. There will be no interruption on both sides. This is where we get into detail and intricacies of the topic.
Okay.
You have
yeah. Go ahead. So you gave the example of people using bad means to protest, people blocking roads, people going on the streets. Do you realize there can be a few bad apples in every coterie of people in every group? So I mean to ask you this question. Sneh, just answer this question in your part. If there's a few bad apples, if there's a few people using bad means from one particular community or one particular religion, will you rile out the entire religion because of them? Just answer this in a yes or no. And that will suffice me for an answer with this point. Coming to the idea that you presented, that people that usually resent the system come from an idea of dictatorship. That people that resent the existing idea, they stand against the system because they want to disrupt, and you somewhat correlated to Marxism, communist propagandas and dictatorship. But the entire idea is that while we consider democracy to be the healthiest form of governing advocacy, activism is what is at the crux of a democracy. People speaking, democracy stands by the people, for the people, and of the people. The two words of the people, these three words hold much more importance than we believe, then we try to understand, and then we realize. These three words of the people represent the voices of every single person bucketed under these lynchships. These three words represent the ideas and the freedoms of every single person wishing to speak up. And it's the protests and activisms which we are talking about right now that gives them a forum to do so. If we were to shut down and completely shut off any protest, any activism, we would honestly be going towards a dictatorial world. We would be going towards a world full of an ideal idea of dictatorialism, of communism, and every idea you talked about in a negative sense. That is exactly what we would achieve if we believed your idea to be a disease.
Okay. Firstly, I would say that I'm not saying that the people who are activists or protesters are, or even woke, are actually communist or capitalist or dictatorial. I am specifically saying they are Marxist, and there's a difference between all three of them. As you say in 3 points, first of all, bad apples, as you say it, that there are few bad apples and they are in minority. Whenever this leftist people talk about the minorities, they represent the minority to be the whole representative of the whole thing. But when it comes to themselves, the minority is not representing the whole thing. Even when the studies or people who even know are in minority, they are representing the whole thing. But when it comes to South Asia, the majority is representing the whole thing. How is that even make sense? Other than that, when you talk about democracy and socialism, there is a difference between democracy and socialism. And those people who protest or become activists in the name of democracy, they are actually coming from a socialist background. They are actually openly supporting parties which are actually socialist and not democracy. And there are few good parts of democracy as well as socialism, and that is what makes it good, I feel like. But they are coming from the ideology of Marxism, wherein the boycotts, protests against the system and all of that come. And boycotting something is not at all democratic. When you ask people to not watch it, even if they are willing to do that, that is where it is not democratic and more of a socialist thing. Now, I am not saying that they are communist or dictatorial, but if they get government, if those activist people were part of the system on a higher rank, they will actually do things which actual Marxist people are doing, which actual dictatorial or communism is doing. That is where their funds came from, that is where their ideologies come from, that is where they themselves are lying in. They never speak about free market. And in usual sense, they are actual product of free market. That is where they are coming from. That is where fathers have developed because of the free market. But now, because they are rich, they don't want anyone else to be rich. Okay, now we get into the Other than that, I personally feel that these people who are activists and protesters.
By the way, Sneh, you didn't answer an important question I posed.
Yes.
About the bad apples exemplar. If out of a group of people, let's say any community, any religion or any belief, if there's a few bad people, would you rile out the entire community as bad?
I am actually saying that minority should represent the country. I am actually saying that. Yes, I am actually saying that minority should not represent the group. Minority should not, only the majority should represent. But remember that when leftists are talking about ideological social media.
You give a yes to the point that you believe that a few bad apples could rile out an entire group of people.
That.
And you believe, you expect us to sit
in a protest,
here and
answer this now. In a protest, how many people don't know about the protest?
With this corrupted
does the majority not know about the protest? In a protest, does the majority not know what the protest is about?
We are not even talking about the majority. Sneh, you haven't clearly understood what I'm coming to.
I am saying the whole as a concept and the whole as a group is the bad apple of the society, not only just one bad apple of the society. The bad apple in itself is activism and protest.
Okay, so let's come to exemplars of our own country. Hindus protested against Manipur's violence. Muslims protested against the hijab ban, CNRC, everything. Christians protested against their churches being broken down. Sikhs protested against the entire Khalistan hatred movement. Jains protested against the attack on some Jain monks currently. So would you rile out all of these religions to be bad
I'm
apples,
not
or would
saying
you
that
just give me a yes
I'm
or
not
no?
saying
Sneh?
there is
These
no yes and no
questions do
answer.
not
Things are
need a
very
serious
nuanced than yes and
answer.
no,
I
sir.
just need a yes
Things are
or
very
no,
nuanced than
please.
yes and no, sir. Things are very nuanced in
This
real
can
life than yes and
absolutely,
no.
if you have
And
such
I
a
would
clear
still say
idea,
yes.
this
I
can
still say
absolutely be
yes.
answered in a yes
I
or
would
no.
still say yes. These people do represent
So
the
for
good part
so
of
according
activism
to
and
you,
protest.
so
These people
according
do
to you,
represent the good part of
according to
activism
you,
protest, and it should
according
exist.
to you,
But if
yeah.
there is riots happening in Manipur, there is nothing that could be done by
do
Gujarat's
not
government. So there should be no
get
protest
into
in Gujarat's
these were
government.
just examples, Sneh. Do not get
I am
into
exactly
details.
pointing to you. Pick up any
So,
example. If there is
so
gun violence in
so
America,
what
there
I
should be no
interpret
protest
from
in
you,
BLM. As
what I
simple as that.
interpret from what you said, what I interpret from what you said, is that it doesn't matter who is protesting or how many people from a group is
No,
protesting.
sir.
That
That
entire
is your
group
wrong
is bad.
interpretation.
That
That is
entire
your
group
wrong
should be
interpretation.
rotten around
I am
and
again saying
sidelined.
I am
That is
not
what you're
against
coming
right to speak.
You're not coming
I
to
am
the
not against right
fact
to
that
speak.
these
I am against
protests that have
wokeism.
led
I am
to the
against
action being
promotion of
taken
right
to
to speak.
revocate these
See,
ideas.
let me speak, then you
You
will
are
understand what I am trying to
absolutely,
say.
because you have this corrupted
Firstly,
idea
sir,
in your
whenever
mind.
whenever a
Because you
particular
follow
person
corrupted
has an
mindset
ideology,
that
they have a sense of
activism is what is
promoting
the
those
bad
ideology
of
to everyone.
society.
That is where things get wrong. The promote. I
Because
believe in a certain thing. You should also believe in a certain thing. If you don't believe, you are stupid. That is what activism is about nowadays. That is where I am against.
okay, so because you
The
follow
promotion
a
of the
mind,
MLM, as I
okay,
said to it,
just
that
hear
is
me
where
out
the
for a
things are
minute.
getting
Hear me
wrong,
out for a
sir.
minute, Sneh. So because you yourself follow the ideal that it's activism and speaking up and the people's voice that leads to evil, thus you are expecting us to believe and fall onto your part that absolutely
No,
nobody
I
should
am not
speak up
even
at all.
convincing you to fall on
This
myself. I
is
am
the
just saying,
most bogus
sir, I am
argument
not
I've ever
against. I
seen
am
in
not
any
against.
debate.
See, I am not
The way
against.
you are able to
I am not
conflict
against
and
people who
justify your
work
evil.
for social
The
work. I
way
am
you
not
are able
against
to
people who work for social
brilliantly
work.
and
I am
so
against
currently,
people who
the
are
way you
not
are
even
so
doing social work but
beautifully just
want everybody to
orchestrating
talk
your
about the social work.
mindset
Who
is
don't even
brilliant to watch,
identify
Sneh.
real problems that exist in the society.
You
You are
don't get
already a
the
delusional people
actual meaning of
who
what
just
protesting
want to
stands
tweet,
for.
sit on their AC
You
rooms
don't
and
get what
tweet
it
about
means
things
to have a
which is not
loss
going to
and
bring
a
any
lack of the
impact.
right to
All
protest.
Eyes on Rafa is not going to bring any impact in society. Just
You
putting out a
have,
story will
you
not
are
bring any
sticking,
impact in society.
you are sticking to just one propaganda that is against your own
I am
belief.
ready to talk
Talk
about any
Manipur
propaganda.
violence.
I am ready to talk
Talk
about
about the
any
Manipur
problems.
violence then. Talk about Manipur violence then. Has
I
that
am
ever
ready
been
to talk
answered?
about it. See,
The
let
Prime
me talk
Minister
about
had
Manipur
to come
violence
to
then.
the
Let me
parliament
talk
and
about
ask
Manipur
because the
violence
people
then.
spoke up.
Let me talk about Manipur violence then. So
You
first
are
of all,
sticking to just one exemplar
let
that
me
stands
know.
into
There
your
are two types of
propaganda.
protest.
You are
Violent
sticking to
protest
just the
and non-violent
exemplars that
protest.
fall under your category.
There are two
You are
types of
sticking to
protests.
just
Violent
those
protest and
examples that are
non-violent
good for
protest. I
you
am
to
against
protest.
non-violent protest,
You are
which
sticking
everybody
to
should
those
be.
examples that
If
shine
there is
you
a
in the
violent protest
sympathetic
happening
light
about
with the
Manipur
victim card.
against the center, I
You
am okay with
fail.
it. I agree
You
with
fail to
Manipur violence
understand that
against.
in any example,
I am in
it is
agreement with
people
Manipur
that
violence
led
against
to the
Manipur.
successful repercussions. You fail to understand that in any example, whether it falls under your propaganda or not, it is people
Are
and
you just
only the
looking at
people's
timer and
voice
speaking,
that
sir?
has led to the world being replicated of
I
its
think his
evil.
earphone is
You
disconnected,
fail
I
to
think.
understand that, Sneh.
Okay.